Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Did I bring you too much sun from Africa? Thank you very much. Professor Gross, for the invitation. I'm truly honored to be here. And I want to acknowledge Ambassador Guibeb, and I have also seen former German ambassador to Namibia, Mr. Kronje. I'm particularly mentioning him because at the time when he was an ambassador to Namibia, we had the project Archive of Anti-Colonial Resistance and Liberation Struggle project, through which some German records were repatriated to Namibia. And for that, I think we work quite well with the German embassy then. And before I start my presentation, which is on Hendrik Witbooi, I also want to respect the great-grandson of Hendrik Witbooi, who is with us in the audience. My discussion today is with respect to one of Namibia's or Africa's greatest leader, Hendrik Witbooi. He was, although he doesn't have any certificates, like PhD or master degree or matriculant of any form, in my opinion, he was a great leader, a historian, a philosopher, and leader of his own people. For those in the audience who are not familiar with Namibian history, I have to recapitulate a few historical details. Hendrik Witbooi was head of an independent Nama community in southern Namibia. The Witbooi or Khoisin, by the time of the German Empire, was colonizing Namibia. And unlike most of his contemporaries, Witbooi was not deceived by the promises made by the German diplomats and officers when they enticed the leaders of local communities to sign the so-called protection treaties. Witbooi could see that, I forgot about the PowerPoints. Witbooi could see that these protection treaties were just pretexts to take control of his country and its resources. Hendrik Witbooi led a diplomatic campaign to convince other local leaders not to sign such treaties. For example, he wrote to Joseph Fredericks of Bethany community, and I cite, "I see the Germans quite differently. They claim that they want to protect you against other mighty nations, but it seems to me that they are themselves the mighty nations seeking to occupy our country by force." End of quote. Further, he writes to another local leader, Samuel Maharero. And again, I cite from the diaries themselves. Witbooi writes, "I doubt that you have fully grasped what it means to surrender to German protection. I doubt that you and your Herero nation will understand the rules and laws and methods of that government and will accept them in peace. and contentment for long. Now, it is for this foresight that Witbooi is honored by having his portrait of the Namibian currency, that is 100 Namibian dollars. Witbooi emphasized that just as rulers of Germany and England, he too was the autonomous ruler of his people, and no other leader had the right to interfere and force his will upon him. He also emphasized that in an earlier formulation of Pan-Africanism, that against any threat he would rather call on fellow African leaders to assist than a foreign overseas power. Witbooi's principled resistance to colonized was answered with the first colonial war and massacre in Namibian history. On 8th April 1893, while the German officer Kurt von Francois was ostensibly still negotiating with Witbooi about the terms of an agreement with his troops launched a surprise attack against Witbooi settlement at Honkran, where they massacred 90 inhabitants, most women and children. And I want to underline women and children because sometimes women and children are used in different terms, but these actually were truly women and children. The German troops led survivors who did not get away into captivity at Windhoek. A certain Dr. Dove, who was visiting the country on the study tour during these events, commended, and I cite, "What we regretted was not the death of women and children, which was unavoidable at such occasions, but the small number of male casualties, which included no personality of importance and none of the leaders." End of quote. So several years later, the American military invented a term, collateral damage, for this type of attitude. All movable properties in the Honkran settlement were looted by the German troops. And this included an important document, a ledger into which Witbooi copied his incoming and outgoing diplomatic correspondence with other local leaders, with the Germans, with the British, but somehow British representatives, and with traders and other local settlers. It was taken by Kurt von Francois, that diary. Kurt von Francois took it to Germany, but somehow got it back into the country before it was occupied in 1915 by the South Africans in the World War I. It was taken into custody by the South African administration and eventually transferred to the National Archive in Windhoek. It became widely known as Diary of Hendrik Witbooi I. Today we call it Hendrik Witbooi Journal I. And the passage that I have cited, all those passages that I have cited are taken from this diary. This book, the first edition of the original text of this book was published was published as a historical source, and on the slide you can see the original of the German translation, which was also published in 1982. It should be mentioned that another document was looted by the German soldiers during the Hornkran raid, and that was the New Testament in a Nama language, written in Nama language, and with handwritten notes on the end of the paper, which identify that it was a property of the Witbooi family. This testament, also referred to as the Witbooi Bible, is still in possession of a museum in Stuttgart and was recently exhibited here at the German Historical Museum in 2016 and 2017 on the special exhibition on colonialism. But the story does not end there. After the war with heavy losses on both sides, Witbooi was forced by Major Leutwein, the later governor, to sign a treaty with the German Empire. Throughout the war, the negotiations, and the following 10 years under the German rule, Witbooi kept 2 other diaries of his correspondence and other documents. When Witbooi, after 10 years under the German rule, joined the Ovaherero anti-colonial uprising, these books were left behind in his capital, Gibeon. And when the inhabitants fled from the German garrison, they left these books behind, and they were found by a trader from Bremen, Mr. Wolf, who searched through the deserted homes before the settlement was dynamited by the Schutztruppe garrison to have a free field of fire in case of an attack by the Witbooi. This slide shows the destroyed house of Mr. Hendrik Witbooi in Gibeon in 1904, and Mr. Wolf together with Witbooi at the corner there. Wolf kept quiet about his find and took the books with him, took the book, which we today call Witbooi Journal 2 and 3, to his home. And when he returned to Bremen in 1935, he sold them to Obersee Museum in Bremen. Undoubtedly, Hendrik Witbooi had started another record, Witbooi Journal 4, at his other residence in Richmond. He had to leave Diary 4 behind when General von Trotta approached his settlement with a vast superior force. This book was again looted by the German soldiers, who apparently took it apart and shared the fragment among themselves as souvenirs. What I have told is a sad story of looting, loss, and displacement. Only if record could speak, if these files could speak, they would tell the story of their provenance. But luckily, it does not end here. I have chosen to present the further story of the Hendrik Witbooi papers as an example of positive way of dealing with this colonial legacy. An example that has unfortunately not many parallel to today. The Witbooi Journal 2 and 3 had incredibly been forgotten at the Übersee Museum in Bremen and were only discovered after Namibia's independence in 1990. Here you can see one of the pages of the Journal 2 with a list of Witbooi's government officials in 1894. So here we are standing here talking about possible repatriation of the cross. But in 1990, there was this repatriation of the Hendrik Witbooi back to Namibia, which I think is very positive. The museums at the Hanseatic city of Bremen did the right thing. They microfilmed the books, restored them professionally at the Bremen State Archives, and returned the originals in 1996 to Namibia to join Journal 1 at the National Archive of Namibia. Here you see the Übersee Museum in Bremen, and that on the right-hand side is the National Archive of Namibia, where these Witbooi journals find the new home. One of the fragments of Journal 4 surfaced in a private property in the former East Germany after German reunification, and was brought by a private collector who made this find known. And I also want to pause here and thank Mr. Werner Hillebrecht, who is sitting in the audience, because it's thanks to him that this fourth diary was discovered. It consists only of 6 pages, but it contains extremely important documents such as Witbooi response to Governor Leutwein, who had asked him why he had again taken up arms against Germany. In moving words, Witbooi regrets the guilt he had accumulated by accepting and assisting the German colonial rule over a period of 10 years. When a joint Namibia-German program to safeguard records of Namibia over 100 years struggle against colonialism and apartheid was operating between 2001 and 2009, one of its major successors was to convince a private owner that this document belonged to Namibia and it could join the other Witbooi documents. Here on the picture, you will see the German ambassador, Dr. Massing, handing a facsimile to Hendrik Witbooi, great-grandson of Hendrik Witbooi, while the original documents were given to the National Archives of Namibia. Unfortunately, the archives program facilitating such transactions ended in 2009 and was not followed up with any similar model. Seeing the relevance of these reunited documents, not only by Namibia, but for the world as a testimony to resistance against colonialism, partitioning of Africa among few European powers, we submitted the Hendrik Witbooi writing in this journal for inscription into the UNESCO Memory of the World Register of the most important documentary heritage of humanity. Now, the Witbooi papers were duly accepted and were registered in 2005 alongside currently 347 other items like the Gutenberg Bible in Göttingen, the Rigveda manuscript in India, the Che Guevara collection in Bolivia and Cuba, and the Phoenician alphabet in Lebanon, and other records like the Rivonia trials in South Africa and so on. That is just a signage at the National Archive of Namibia when you enter, so it shows that in this house is housed the documents of world significance. It's also the first and the only document from Namibia. Although the original books of Hendrik Witbooi are locked away in the box you see there, we have digitized the Witbooi diaries, and they can be searched in the reading room while the originals are kept away without endangering, and because they are very fragile also. And I must also say that these documents are frequently searched. They are very much in demand. Which lessons can we draw from the fate of these documents? Created in Namibia, moved all over across oceans and back, and especially with those others that we still don't know where they are. While there is no turning back the clock and undo the damage that colonialism and genocide inflicted, there are specific acts that we can do in order to recognize and name the injustices and to reverse what we can reverse. The repatriation of cultural objects is more than a legal recognition of ownership. It is also a practical act of apology and reconciliation. We deeply appreciate the return of the Witbooi journal, both from the public custody in the case of Bremen and from the private custody, such as in the case of the Journal 4. We have to engage seriously with hidden stories behind those objects that were displaced and taken out of their context. It is significant that 2 Witbooi diaries had been forgotten in Bremen for 50 years, in a Germany that had conveniently forgotten its role in colonizing Africa. Bremen was actually a bit ahead of others 20 years ago, but I am confident that the provenance research in German museums that has started only recently will lead to a substantial further discovery, because we can only repatriate what we know. If I don't know what you have in your museum, I cannot stand here and say return this one unless I know what exists. So we are really looking forward to the process that has just been started. This process needs to be driven and carried by both Namibia and Germany. We did not just say thank you. And we did not just say thank you and put the Witbooi journals away in a safe in Windhoek, but worked on it, we cataloged it, we digitized it, we transcribed it, and internationally promoted them as they are now on the memory of the world. And this work is still going on. Lastly, I want to say that what you see there, they are justified complaints in Namibia that there are thousands of well-maintained war graves of German soldiers in Namibia who fell during several wars, while no graves at all to commemorate the tens of thousands of Herero, Nama, and Damaras who perished in the genocide. None at all. But I want you to have a close look at those German graves. Most of them buried there are young men in their 20s who died far away from home. Not for themselves, not for their families, but for a crazy idea of empire. The world power, and for a profit of the few. Doesn't that also have an important story to tell to all of us here and to German young people of today? Are these museum objects? Are they colonial objects? What are they? Lastly, conclusively, I see this process initiated here by the German History Museum an opportunity for future dialogue and reconciliation. We do not say empty or storehouses and museums and send them to Namibia. Case closed. No. Our histories are entangled history. And we cannot escape this fact. These objects have a story to tell to the German people, to the Namibian people, and to our youth. To have it told, we must work together. And I thank you very much, but before I close, I just want to make a point that we are here about the cross. The cross is behind me. What does it mean to repatriate the cross? Does it mean take it to Namibia and wash off your responsibility? I don't think the story ends there. I think we have to ask ourselves deeper questions than just to repatriate. Thank you very much.